All right, let's talk about this Family Guy episode. Sometimes I feel like I'm watching these shows from two different dimensions. On one hand, you've got Seth MacFarlane doing his thing, and I swear, the dude must have a magic 8-ball that just spits out plot points. Then on the other hand, you have an episode that feels like it was written by someone who actually looked up the definition of social commentary and decided to run with it. I mean, what is going on here? We open with that classic Family Guy theme song, which, let's be honest, is more iconic than half the actual songs on the radio these days. It's that "It seems today that all you see" tune, right? And then, bam, Tom Tucker's on screen, looking like he just wrestled a badger for his toupee. He's got this whole thing about his hair guy being on vacation and him not being able to reach him. First off, Tom, we can all see the hair dye, buddy. It's not exactly subtle. And it sets us up for this whole Emmy Burr story. Mary Elizabeth Becca Ryan, or Emmy Burr as her diehard fans, apparently only one person in this household is a diehard fan, is dropping her first single. And surprise, it's about a face chair. Sounds innocent enough, right? Wrong. This is Family Guy. Nothing is innocent. Brian, in a moment of what I can only assume was extreme boredom or a desperate attempt to seem relevant, is totally obsessed with Emmy Burr. He's got her name tattooed above his root. Which, considering his general personality, sounds about right. He claims he's always talking about her, but I'm pretty sure Meg just invented this whole fandom on the spot to make a point. And that point is, everyone's got their thing, right? Some people are into sports, some into anime, and apparently some people are into a former child star who went from making oink-oink noises on a farm show to dropping unexpectedly filthy singles. The usual career trajectory. This episode really dives headfirst into the cult of celebrity and how far people will go for their idols. It also, and this is the really interesting part, tries to tackle the idea of toxic fan culture and the power these stars wield, whether they want to or not. It's a whole mess, and honestly, it's wild to see the show actually try to do something like this. Stick around, because we're going to unpack just how deep this rabbit hole goes, and trust me, it gets weirder than you can imagine. Seriously, there's a moment later on that involves a blanket slide that will live rent-free in my head for weeks. Hey, if you're finding this whole deep dive into celebrity worship and toxic fandom as fascinatingly messed up as I am, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep doing this, and honestly, you don't want to miss what's coming next, because it involves even more questionable life choices from this family. Okay, so on the surface, this episode is about the rise of a new pop star, Mary Elizabeth Becca Ryan, or Meb, and the extreme devotion of her fans, called marionettes. Brian gets sucked into this fandom, while Stewie, predictably, gets on the wrong side of it after making a critical comment. We also have Peter's weight problem, which the family tries to address, leading to some pretty darkly funny medical discussions and an even darker medical decision. It's kind of two storylines, right? You've got the MEBR stuff and the Peter weight loss stuff. They don't really intersect in a meaningful way until the very end, and even then it feels a little tacked on. But what's the show really trying to say here? It's definitely digging into the dangers of parasocial relationships. Brian's obsession with MEBR is a textbook example of someone projecting their own needs and desires onto a celebrity, to the point where it affects his judgment and his relationships. And then there's Stewie, who gets the full force of this parasocial attack when he dares to criticize MEBR. The show is highlighting how quickly these fan bases can turn nasty and unforgiving when their idol is perceived to be threatened. It's a commentary on online mobs and how easily people can be radicalized by a celebrity's actions or inactions. On the flip side, Peter's storyline is a much more traditional Family Guy exploration of laziness and the pursuit of quick fixes. His refusal to exercise or change his diet, opting instead for extreme medical intervention, is peak Peter. It's also a way for the show to poke fun at the healthcare system and the absurdity of certain medical trends, like the lap band surgery being bundled with a Nintendo Switch. Where does this episode fit in the grand scheme of things? Well, it feels like a topical episode, trying to tap into current conversations about influencer culture and online hate. It's not a landmark episode for the series, but it's a solid example of Family Guy trying to stay relevant by addressing modern issues, albeit in their signature crude and exaggerated way. The writing is a bit uneven. The MEBR plotline is where the real commentary is, and it's surprisingly well developed, considering how chaotic Family Guy usually is. The MEBR plotline feels like it has a point, whereas the Peter plotline is mostly just there for gags. The jokes are hit or miss, as usual. Some land perfectly, especially the ones poking fun at the absurdity of the fan culture, while others feel a bit forced. Visually, it's standard Family Guy animation. Nothing groundbreaking, but the direction is competent. The pacing is decent, the two storylines keep moving, even if they don't always feel connected. My verdict? It's a decent episode that tries to do something a little more thoughtful than usual. It's not a masterpiece, but it's far from the worst we've seen. It's one of those episodes that's better than you expect it to be, because it actually attempts to engage with a relevant topic beyond just a cheap gag. It's a solid 7.3 out of 10 for me. It earns points for its attempt at social commentary, but loses a few for the somewhat disjointed plot and the fact that Peter's storyline feels like a generic Family Guy B-plot. Let's get into some of the moments that really stuck out, or maybe just bewildered me. First up, the introduction of MEBR and Brian's instant fanatical devotion. Tom Tucker is reading the news, and the story is about Mary Elizabeth Becker Ryan, a former star from Jolly Farm, releasing her first single, Face Chair. And Brian, bless his little heart, is already there. He's not just a fan, he's a real fan, the kind who calls her MEBR. He's got a tattoo of her name right above his root. Now, first off, the Jolly Farm reference is a nice touch, painting this picture of innocent beginnings for this future pop sensation. And Brian's root tattoo comment? That's peak Brian, trying way too hard to sound edgy and failing spectacularly. It sets up this entire arc where he's completely lost in fandom. The joke here isn't just that he's a fan, it's the intensity of the fandom and how easily it's weaponized. He claims he's always talking about her, but he's clearly an obsessive, not an influencer. And the tattoo being low because it's on his root is just Family Guy logic at its finest, a ridiculous premise explained away with equally ridiculous reasoning. What's it trying to say? It's immediately establishing that this isn't just a casual interest, it's a full-blown obsession, a symptom of a deeper need for connection, which Brian, being Brian, will invariably misdirect towards a celebrity. It's the foundation for the whole fan culture commentary. What would I do differently? Maybe make Brian's obsessions slightly less immediate.
Have him discover her a little later in the episode to make his sudden conversion more impactful, or perhaps have another character call him out on his sudden interest earlier. But honestly, Brian's blind devotion is part of his charm, or lack thereof. It's a pretty solid setup for the character dynamics. Then we've got Peter's health crisis and the family's intervention. Chris asks Peter to play catch, and Peter, instead of just saying no, makes a whole production out of it, panting and acting like it's the hardest thing in the world. He then suggests they call Boston Dynamics Dad instead, which is a hilarious jab at modern parenting and the concept of automated solutions. He's so out of shape, he can't even play catch without needing robotic assistance. Lois is just done. She lays into him, saying his weight is affecting his relationship with Chris, and that boys need a father who can spend time with them. Peter's response? A couple of hard sniffs and a spit, and he's convinced he'll be fine. It's such a classic Peter move, completely deflecting and resorting to the most absurd, unscientific remedies. He literally just tries to sniff his way to health. The absolute laziness is astonishing. It's meant to be funny, and it is, but it also highlights how truly unhealthy Peter's lifestyle is. It's not just a gag, it's a character trait that the show is using to drive the plot forward. The show is saying, look at this extreme example of denial and avoidance. And the fact that he wants to be slid to the TV on a blanket, that's pure Peter. It's a visual gag that perfectly encapsulates his commitment to inertia. If I were writing this, I might have made Lois's confrontation a little more serious, maybe with a doctor's visit involved earlier. But then again, this is Family Guy. They need the absurdity to make the point stick. This whole scene perfectly sets up Peter's eventual decision about the lap band surgery. Meg's role in this episode, or rather her lack of one, is a classic Family Guy trope. She's shown listening to Ember's song, Face Chair, and recording a TikTok. Stewie walks in and questions if the song is too dirty for a baby. Meg, ever the defender of the artist she's obsessed with, launches into an explanation of the lyrics, framing it as an unboxing video. She's basically a stan, trying to rationalize the questionable content. The lyrics she quotes are, "Knock knock, there's a box, and it's coming for you. Open up with care, then drop that box right on your chair." It's pretty abstract, and Meg's interpretation is wild.
She's grasping at straws to defend it. The whole exchange is meant to show how easily fans can twist lyrics to fit their narrative and ignore any potential problematic meanings. Stewie's reaction, wanting to go eat Taco Bell in the other room, is just perfect. He's disgusted by both the song and Meg's defense. The follow-up about MEBR saying you should only eat organic food for the environment, and Meg's justification that she only had $1.67 for 2 tacos and a soda is a brilliant satirical jab at the performative environmentalism and extreme dietary advice often peddled by influencers and celebrities. It highlights the disconnect between the idealized lifestyle promoted by MEBR and the reality for most people. It's funny because it's so relatable to the kind of advice you see online. It shows how fans adopt even the most impractical aspects of their idol's lifestyle. I love this moment because it so perfectly captures the echo chamber of fan culture. Stewie gets completely blasted by MEBR's fans, the Marionettes. He makes a comment about the song, and Meg calls him out for not having 60 million Instagram followers. Brian, ever the sensible one, or at least the less insane one, points out that Meg only has 12 followers, 11 after Joe unfollowed her for a defund post. This whole exchange is a sharp, funny jab at the clout-chasing culture of social media and how fans measure a celebrity's worth by their follower count. Then Meg declares herself a marionette, comparing them to Beyoncé's Beehive, but instead of bees, they send jumbo pretzels. The pretzel detail is hilarious and bizarre. Brian rightly calls out the unhealthy nature of attaching one's identity to a celebrity. Meg's retort, calling him out for blindly running to a can opener, is a classic Family Guy comeback, using a character's known weakness against them. The contrast between Brian's reasoned argument and Meg's fanatical defense is stark. The episode is really leaning into the idea that these fan bases are like cults. Meg's assertion that MEBR sees the world in a way you won't ever see Brian is the height of delusion. Brian's deadpan with blues and greens is perfect. He's not engaging with her fantasy. The episode is showing how fandom can warp reality and create an us versus them mentality. I think the writers did a fantastic job here of showing the rapid escalation of stan culture, where any perceived slight against the celebrity can ignite a firestorm. Then there's the scene where Peter goes to the doctor about his weight.
He's clearly trying to avoid actual effort. He's asked about increasing exercise? Pass. Switching to a vegan diet? I'd rather die. Quitting drinking? He just curses and says, bleep. He's looking for the easiest possible solution. He asks, is there something simple we could start with first? Yeah. What did Honey Boo Boo's mom do? This is pure gold. It connects 2 unlikely figures, a cartoon dad and a reality TV mom, both known for less than healthy lifestyles. The doctor suggests lap band surgery, and here's where it gets really funny. The hospital is running a promotion where it comes with a free Nintendo Switch. They claim lap band surgery is very popular in the Switch community. It's a ridiculous tie-in, poking fun at how businesses will slap promotions on anything. Peter, of course, asks, do I have to walk to the surgery room? And the doctor, in a moment of peak Peter enabling, says, we'll put you on a blanket and slide you in right now. It's the ultimate symbol of his unwillingness to exert himself. This entire sequence is a darkly comedic look at the desperate measures people take to avoid self-improvement and the absurd marketing schemes that arise from it. It's peak Family Guy humor, taking a serious topic and making it utterly ridiculous. Stewie's concert experience is peak chaos. He's at the MEBR concert trying to record a TikTok to her song. This is where the face chair lyrics are quoted directly. Open up with care, then drop that box right in your chair. It's framed as an unboxing video by Meg earlier, and here it's being used in the context of the song itself. The crowd is cheering, calling themselves marionettes. MEBR, in a classic Gen Z move, checks her phone during her performance. She sees Stewie's post and, naturally, thinks he's making fun of her. She puts him on blast, and suddenly, his account is blocked, locked, and he's facing the wrath of the marionettes. The crowd turns on him, calling him a bully. This is the turning point where Stewie becomes the target. The show is showing the immediate and devastating consequences of crossing a powerful fan base. It's a hyper-realistic portrayal of online shaming and cancellation culture. The speed at which this happens is what's truly terrifying, and also darkly hilarious in its exaggeration. He needs to get out of there fast. The scene where he's trying to find his coat and they discover multiple Glen plaid car coats with fur-lined collars is pure observational comedy about how ridiculously specific and yet somehow generic certain fashion items can be.
Then the pleather jacket with every NFL logo on it shows up. That's a great visual gag for someone trying to be inconspicuous. The contrast between Stewie's panic and the mundane reality of a lost coat is classic. And then the rain starts, and he's left with a chewed-up walking stick with gum on it, while someone else has a Burberry umbrella. It's just a perfect storm of bad luck and escalating problems. This moment really highlights the show's willingness to go for topical satire. The aftermath of Stewie's concert ordeal is where the true horror of the marionettes unfolds. Stewie is in hiding, being attacked online. His accounts are flooded, his favorite froyo place got doxxed, and someone even made a deepfake of him at the Capitol riots. He insists he was there, but never went inside the building, man. This is a brutal, albeit exaggerated, depiction of online harassment. The doxing of a froyo place is so specific and so petty, it's perfect. The Capitol riot deepfake is a darker, more serious reference, showing how far the marionettes are willing to go. Brian tries to explain it as stan culture, where fans form strong bonds and attack anyone who insults their idol. Stewie feels like he can't explain himself, and no one will listen. He wishes he could reach out to Menbear directly. Brian's attempt at solidarity, suggesting he's there for Stewie privately, is met with a harsh coward. Stewie is completely isolated. The episode is really exploring the isolating effects of online hate and the feeling of powerlessness against a mob. Brian's advice is well-intentioned, but ultimately useless in the face of such extreme fandom. Stewie's despair and paranoia are palpable. The show is essentially saying that these online communities, while offering connection, can also become incredibly toxic and dangerous. The humor comes from the extreme reactions and the absurd ways people are being attacked. The visual of Stewie clutching Rupert for comfort, lamenting the virus of hate that has infected his world, is genuinely sad, even if it's within a cartoon. Now, Peter's post-surgery experience. He wakes up feeling amazing, singing, "At last, my love has come along." He then has to admit he did stuff with the stripper at the bachelorette party. This is classic Peter, quick to embrace the superficial benefits of a decision without fully processing the consequences or the reasons behind it. He's feeling good, but he's already backsliding. His singing of the Menbear song, "Open Up With Care, Then Drop That Box Right in Your Chair," is a callback to the earlier scene, showing how the song is now ingrained in their lives, for better or worse.
The fact that he's celebrating his weight loss by going to a concert and admitting to cheating on Lois during a bachelorette party just shows how little actual growth has happened. He's physically lighter, but mentally, he's still the same Peter. The show uses this to underscore the idea that physical change doesn't automatically equate to personal growth or happiness. It's a cynical take, but typical for Family Guy. He's living in his own little post-op euphoria, blissfully unaware of the damage he might have caused. The show's writers clearly don't believe in easy answers when it comes to personal change. The concert scene with MEBR is pure cringe comedy. MEBR thanks her little marionettes and then immediately checks her phone, like all Gen Z performers. The phrase Gen Z performers is a bit of a generalization, but it fits the Family Guy mold of poking fun at stereotypes. Stewie's phone buzzes and MEBR responds. Oh no, she thought his post was making fun of her. She puts him on blast. His account is blocked and locked. He's being called a bully, and the crowd boos him. This is the moment Stewie realizes he's made a huge mistake, and that the power of the marionettes is no joke. The crowd turning on him so quickly is terrifying. It's a stark reminder of how easily online mobs can be mobilized. Stewie's panic is palpable as he and Brian try to escape the angry mob. Brian's attempt to grab their coats and get out is frantic. The dialogue about the Glen plaid car coat with a fur-lined collar and the pleather jacket with NFL logos is a fantastic bit of visual humor and characterization, showing the different styles and priorities of the characters. Stewie's utter despair and Brian's attempt to be the voice of reason create a dynamic that's both funny and a little sad. This entire sequence is the comedic climax of Stewie's MEBR storyline, showing the devastating consequences of his actions in the face of an overzealous fandom. The contrast between Stewie's coat search and Peter's recovery is another example of the show's sometimes disjointed storytelling. While Stewie is dealing with the terrifying reality of being doxxed and targeted by a mob, Peter is having a delirious experience post-surgery, feeling like a bride. He's singing the MEBR song, which is a pretty dark and ironic use of the song given Stewie's situation. The lyrics are repeated, and Peter's focus is entirely on his own physical state and the immediate gratification of the surgery. He's oblivious to the chaos Stewie is experiencing. This juxtaposition highlights the show's typical structure, where multiple unrelated plot lines run concurrently, often with little thematic connection until the very end. It's a classic Family Guy move to have these disparate threads, but here it feels particularly jarring. The humor comes from the absurdity of Peter's situation and his complete lack of self-awareness, contrasting with Stewie's very real, within the context of the show, predicament. The scene is a perfect example of Family Guy's brand of humor. Take a serious topic, like weight loss surgery, and inject it with absurdity and dark comedy. Let's talk about the what if they did it differently section for this episode. For the MEBR storyline, what if Stewie's initial comment wasn't a direct criticism, but more of an accidental, innocent observation that Meg and the marionettes interpret as an insult? For example, maybe Stewie is playing with his toys and says something like, "This chair is really uncomfortable, I can't even sit in it," and Meg overhears and twists it into Stewie attacking MEBR's space chair concept. That would have made Stewie's plight more of an unjust persecution and less about him being directly antagonistic. It would have amplified the theme of fanatical interpretation and how easily meaning can be distorted. For Peter's storyline, what if the free Nintendo Switch promotion was a bit more integrated into the plot? Maybe Peter, recovering from surgery, becomes addicted to the Switch, and that becomes the new source of his problems, replacing his weight. It could have led to a funny, albeit still dark, commentary on addiction and how new obsessions can replace old ones. It would have provided a more substantial arc for Peter's storyline beyond just the surgery itself. It's these kinds of shifts that could have made the episode feel a bit more cohesive or deepen the satire. Now for the character heat check. Brian. He's the voice of reason, or at least he tries to be. In this episode, he's stuck trying to navigate Meg's extreme fandom and Stewie's social media meltdown. He's the one trying to offer logical advice, but he's largely ignored. His attempt to be a supportive friend to Stewie is commendable, but ultimately futile, because he's still Brian, and his own judgment isn't exactly stellar. He's more of a spectator and occasional commentator than an active participant, which is pretty standard for him. He's not the sharpest version of himself here, more of a sounding board.
Meg, on the other hand, is fully committed. She's a marionette, defending MEBR with a fervor usually reserved for cult leaders. Her interpretation of the lyrics and her defense of MEBR's lifestyle choices are classic Meg, desperate for validation and clinging to something that gives her a sense of belonging, even if it's a celebrity. She's used as the embodiment of the fanatical fan, and in that role, she's actually pretty effective. She's certainly not filling space. She's driving the MEBR plot. Stewie, of course, is the catalyst for the whole online conflict. He's the outsider who dares to speak ill of the Queen, and he pays the price. His descent into paranoia and isolation is played for laughs, but there's also a genuine sense of him being overwhelmed by the mob. He's the victim of the show's satire on stan culture. His moment at the retreat lamenting Rupert's death shows a softer side, but it's immediately undercut by his morbid humor. Peter, post-surgery, is a study in superficial change. He feels amazing physically, but his actions, the cheating, the singing, show that his core personality hasn't budded. He's used as the vehicle for the show's critique of quick fixes and the healthcare industry. His best moment is probably asking, "What did Honey Boo Boo's mom do?" It's a perfect encapsulation of his approach to problem solving. Let's hunt for some hidden gems. One thing I noticed was the subtle jab at the Jolly Farm premise itself. While MEBR is presented as a former star, the implication is that Jolly Farm was probably a pretty low-budget, possibly exploitative children's show, given the fates of the other kids. It's a quick background detail that adds a layer of cynicism to the whole celebrity origin story. Another gem is the specific phrasing when Peter asks about weight loss options. Pass, I'd rather die, and then the curse for quitting drinking. These are such extreme, childish reactions, but they're delivered so matter-of-factly that they become hilarious. It's the delivery that makes it a hidden gem, because it normalizes Peter's complete refusal to take responsibility. Then there's the redacted information when the doctor discusses Peter's options. The screen briefly shows what looks like medical jargon, but then it's immediately censored with a bleep when Peter reacts negatively. It's a visual gag that implies the doctors know Peter's unhealthy lifestyle is way beyond repair, but they're sanitizing it for his delicate sensibilities. And finally, the gag about the Switch community and lap band surgery. The idea that this surgery is somehow popular with gamers is so random and absurd that it's a perfect hidden detail. It's a throwaway line that many might miss, but it perfectly encapsulates the show's ability to connect unrelated concepts for comedic effect. The fact that the university study about socialization is from Indiana and that it's validated by Ivy League schools is a wonderfully specific and slightly absurd detail that undercuts the seriousness of the point being made, typical of Family Guy's style of embedding social commentary within silliness. So, what if they did it differently? For Stewie's storyline, instead of him actively criticizing MEBR, what if he was trying to support her in his own misguided way? Imagine Stewie, in an attempt to boost MEBR's image, creates a fake scandal or a fake feud with another celebrity to generate buzz. Then, when MEBR's real fans, the marionettes, discover his interference, they turn on him because they feel he's playing games with their idol's career.
This would have flipped the narrative, making Stewie the victim of his own good intentions gone wrong, which feels more in character for him sometimes, and it still allows for the critique of fan culture and celebrity manipulation. For Peter's weight loss journey, what if the free Nintendo Switch came with a mandatory online gaming group therapy session? Peter would have to interact with other people trying to lose weight, leading to all sorts of awkward and funny social dynamics. It would also force him into a situation where he might have to confront his issues beyond just the physical. The writers could have explored the idea of shared struggle and accountability in a way that's more active than just passive surgery and a free console. This would have provided more opportunities for comedic interactions and allowed the show to explore themes of community and support, albeit in a twisted Family Guy way. All right, the verdict. This episode gets a solid 7.1 out of 10. It's not a show-stopping classic, but it's a perfectly respectable episode that actually tries to engage with a contemporary social issue, toxic fan culture and celebrity worship. It earns its points for the surprisingly sharp satire in the MEBR storyline and Stewie's hilarious yet terrifying takedown by the marionettes. The writing there felt tighter and more purposeful than usual. The Peter storyline is more of a standard Family Guy B-plot, relying on gross-out humor and Peter's inherent laziness, but it's still entertaining enough and provides the necessary contrast.
It loses points for the slightly disjointed feeling between the two main plots and for some jokes that just don't land as hard as others. The pacing is decent, but sometimes it feels like they're rushing through the MEBR plot to get to the next gag. The episode is really for viewers who appreciate Family Guy's attempts at social commentary, even if they're delivered with a sledgehammer. If you're looking for a laugh-out-loud think piece episode that still retains that signature Family Guy absurdity, this one delivers. What would have pushed this score higher? A more seamless integration of Peter's storyline with the MEBR plot. Imagine if Peter's weight loss, or lack thereof, somehow directly impacted Stewie's situation, or vice versa. That kind of interconnectedness would have elevated it from two separate stories to one cohesive episode. Ultimately, this episode stands as a good example of Family Guy's evolution, showing that they can still tackle relevant topics with their usual brand of humor, even if it's not always perfect. It's episodes like these, the ones that reach a little beyond pure silliness, that make you keep watching, wondering what they'll tackle next. And who knows, maybe Tom Tucker's hair guy will finally come back from vacation in the next one.
Okay, so Peter Griffin, the man, the myth, the legend. Or, the inexplicably animated dad who constantly makes questionable life choices. And this episode, Season 21, Episode 9, it's got that classic Family Guy flavor, right? That weird mix of the utterly absurd and the, well, also absurd. It feels like Seth MacFarlane and the gang decided to throw a bunch of random ideas at the wall during a particularly long meeting, and this is what stuck. And honestly, sometimes that chaotic energy is exactly what we tune in for. We're talking about a show that's been around long enough to see cultural touchstones rise and fall, and yet here we are, still watching Peter bumble his way through life. It's a testament to something? Persistence? Our collective inability to find anything else to watch? Regardless, this episode promised more of the same. A little bit of family chaos, a little bit of Stewie being terrifyingly brilliant, and Brian being Brian. And honestly, if you're watching Family Guy, you know what you're getting into. And sometimes that's the comfort. But what did they really do with this one? Did they just rehash old gags, or did they accidentally stumble upon some profound truth about family, or maybe just about the sheer amount of pumpkin spice that exists in the world? We're going to dive deep, dissect every bizarre moment, and figure out if this episode is a hidden gem or just another Tuesday for the Griffins. And trust me, there are some moments in here that will make you question everything. Like that whole situation with the van. Yeah, that. Stick around because we're going to unravel this whole glorious mess. And make sure you're subscribed, because if you think this episode was wild, you haven't seen anything yet. We're here to break down all the insanity, and if you don't hit that subscribe button, you're missing out on all the fun. And honestly, if you're not subscribed, what are you even doing with your life? Seriously, it's like watching Family Guy without Peter saying something incredibly stupid. It's just incomplete. So this episode, it really leans into the whole Family Guy is back vibe, which is a lot. It starts off with that iconic theme song, which, let's be honest, is more memorable than half the episodes themselves. It sets the scene, the fall festival, the overwhelming scent of pumpkin spice. And immediately it pokes fun at itself, and by extension, us, the viewers who are probably also surrounded by pumpkin spice everything. It's that self-aware humor that Family Guy does so well, or at least tries to do. The main plot really kicks off with Peter getting into the carnival games, and of course, he's awful at them. He's trying to play guess your weight, and his estimation of a 30-minute wait is hilariously accurate, leading to him just leaving. It's a classic Peter move. Avoid any effort, embrace immediate gratification, even if it means abandoning a game he hasn't even started. Then we get Stewie, doing his thing. He's got this whole interaction with this woman Amber about her hormone monstrous tattoo. It's a weirdly specific detail, and it's exactly the kind of thing that makes you go, where does this even come from? The tattoo is apparently something she saw on Netflix, which is a nice little jab at our current media consumption habits. It's all very superficial, very based on immediate desires, which sets up a lot of what happens later. And Stewie, bless his miniature heart, is still Stewie, making that incredibly forward offer to bang her in a porta potty. It's that precocious, slightly disturbing, utterly unchildlike dialogue that Stewie excels at, and it's delivered with such deadpan seriousness that it's almost charming. Brian, meanwhile, is off doing his own thing, getting swept up in this carnival romance with Amber. He's apparently been drinking ethanol, which is a nice touch to explain why he's so easily swayed, and also why he's forgetting Stewie's name. It's that classic Brian cycle: bad decisions, questionable relationships, and a complete lack of self-awareness. The show then pivots to a game show segment, Generation Gap. This is where the family's dysfunction really gets put on display for public humiliation, which, let's face it, is Family Guy's bread and butter. The questions are designed to highlight how little they actually know about each other. Like asking what a child wants to be when they grow up, and the answers are so off, it's painful. Lois's Lady NASA scientist versus Peter's Hidden Figures gal is a decent enough gag, showing his superficial understanding of her aspirations. But then you get to Chris and Peter, and it's just bleak. Their shared answer of retire after large personal injury settlement says so much about their perceived futures. It's not aspirational, it's just an outcome. And Peter's answer for Chris's hobby being leprechaun versus Chris's actual hobby being road construction is classic Peter misinterpretation, but it also feels a bit sad. It shows that he's not paying attention. The game show really serves as a metaphor for the family's overall disconnect. They're all in the same room, but they're not really together. The episode uses this segment to establish the dynamic. Peter and Chris are a unit, Lois is trying to hold it all together, and Stewie is Stewie. Brian's storyline with Amber continues, and it's exactly what you'd expect. She's leaving town, it's a whirlwind romance, and it's all about instant gratification. The age ambiguity of Amber, either 27 or 61, is a pretty funny way to describe someone who's perhaps a bit rough around the edges, or maybe just has seen a lot of miles. And Brian's desperate plea to know if abortion is still legal in Rhode Island when Amber mentions she's leaving with the carnival, that's a dark punchline even for Family Guy, and it highlights how quickly things can go sideways when you're not thinking straight, or in Brian's case, when you're drinking ethanol. Then the episode shifts focus back to Lois and her frustration. She's embarrassed by Peter and Chris's performance on Generation Gap, which is understandable. The show uses this to push Peter to actually bond with Chris. This is where the episode tries to have a bit of heart, or at least a contrived attempt at it. Peter's interaction with Chris, starting with that awkward knocking, is peak Family Guy awkwardness. They bond over shared hatred of Lois's nagging. Their examples are specific and ridiculous. Peter's anus drying with her hairdryer, Chris freezing bees. It's the kind of dark, twisted humor that makes you laugh while also feeling a little guilty. They find common ground by complaining about their mom, which is a relatable, if not particularly healthy, way for them to connect. This bonding moment, however, feels manufactured. It's driven by Lois's need for them to connect, rather than a genuine desire from Peter or Chris. This leads into the power shift subplot. Peter and Chris's newfound bonding makes Lois feel sidelined. She's losing control. This is where the show's commentary on family dynamics, however shallow, comes into play. Lois feels like she's being excluded from this new alliance, and the episode uses that to fuel her actions. She needs to break them apart. Her descent into manipulating them, using a screenplay app and watching Aaron Sorkin masterclass, is a surprisingly detailed portrayal of a sitcom character plotting revenge. It's funny because it's so elaborate for such a petty goal. The whole fireworks incident, funded by Lois's credit card, is a chaotic escalation. It's pure Family Guy mayhem, with Peter and Chris's impulsive fun colliding with Lois's strategic plotting. The idea of them using her credit card for fireworks you'd normally have to be a town to buy is an absurd exaggeration that highlights their recklessness and her growing desperation. Meanwhile, Stewie is still dealing with Brian's Amber situation. Brian is completely oblivious, thinking Amber is the perfect girl for him, while Stewie, ever the pragmatist, is calling out the absurdity of it all. The crushed Fruit Loops detail in Amber's van is both disgusting and bizarrely specific, a testament to the show's commitment to weird details. It's the kind of sensory detail that makes the fantasy feel gross. Brian's naive acceptance of all this and Stewie's commentary on it is a constant source of humor. He's so easily manipulated, and Stewie sees right through it. The episode then introduces a twist. Amber is stealing their mail. This escalates Brian's predicament from a simple Carny fling to actual criminality, and the ensuing chaos of trying to stop her is classic Family Guy. The scene where Brian is trying to break up with her and she's just stealing their mail is the perfect encapsulation of the show's brand of absurdity. It's not just that she's a bad person, she's a comically bad person. The episode's ending feels like a classic Family Guy wrap-up. Lois's plan to drive a wedge between Peter and Chris backfires, at least in a way that reinforces their bond, albeit through shared annoyance at her efforts. And the essay about Joe Swanson being Chris's hero is a brilliant twist. It's not just about Peter and Chris bonding over shared disdain, it's about Chris finding a paternal figure outside of Peter, and the absolute shock on Peter's face when he reads it. And the comparison of Peter to Jennifer Lopez, that's a punchline that hits hard. The icing on the cake is Peter's own essay about Charles from Charles in Charge, revealing his preference for a fictional babysitter over his own son. It's a darkly funny reflection of parental disconnect and the way families can misunderstand each other so profoundly. The final scene with Stewie in an AA-style meeting for milkaholics is a perfect, slightly surreal coda. It wraps up his minor plotline with a nod to Brian's issues and adds a final absurd touch to the episode. Overall, the episode felt like a pretty solid Family Guy outing.
It had its moments of classic humor, its character-driven conflicts, and that signature weirdness that keeps us coming back. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it delivered on the promise of a chaotic family adventure. It's the kind of episode that makes you laugh, cringe, and then wonder what the heck you just watched. And that's kind of the point, isn't it? It's the Family Guy recipe, and this episode, for the most part, got the ingredients right. So let's talk about some of the moments that really stuck out in this episode, because, let's be honest, Family Guy is all about those random, unforgettable bits. First up, that opening song. It's so ingrained in our brains, you could probably hum it in your sleep. But the lyrics, it seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV. Classic stuff, right? It's the show's way of saying, yeah, we know we do that, but we're self-aware about it. And then, but where are those good old-fashioned values on which we used to rely? Followed by, lucky there's a Family Guy. It's a tongue-in-cheek jab at itself, acknowledging that their version of values is pretty damn skewed. But hey, at least they're a Family Guy. It's like the show is winking at us, saying, we're not going to preach, we're just going to be weird, and you're going to like it. My take on it, it's the perfect setup. It's the spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down. The preface to 2 minutes of Peter Griffin doing something that would get him arrested in real life. I would have loved to see them lean into that irony even harder. Maybe have the song glitch out, or have Peter interrupt it to say something completely off topic, like complaining about the cost of gas. That would have been peak meta. But as it is, it's just a solid, familiar opening that tells you exactly what you're in for. Then we have Stewie and the hormone monstrous tattoo. Stewie's fascination with her and her very blunt description of her life choices, culminating in her offer to bang him in a porta potty. This whole interaction is peak Stewie and peak Family Guy. Stewie's maturity, his almost sociopathic detachment from typical childhood concerns, allows him to engage with this adult situation with a bizarrely practical, yet still childlike curiosity. His question about the porta potty smelling like all different peas mixed together, and his ultimate acceptance with a hell yes, is the kind of dark humor that the show does so well. It's shocking, it's funny because it's so inappropriate, and it's delivered by a baby. What makes this work is the contrast. We expect babies to be innocent and naive, but Stewie is anything but. He's a miniature adult with a penchant for chaos and a surprisingly open approach to casual sex, at least when he's not the one doing the other thing. My problem with the scene, though, is that it felt a little undercooked. Amber's character is presented as this object of desire for Brian and a questionable conquest for Stewie, but she's also just a caricature. I would have loved to see a little more substance, or at least more of a satirical edge to her character beyond just carnival worker who likes sex. Maybe she has a surprisingly profound take on life that's completely at odds with her lifestyle. Or, on the flip side, lean even harder into the disturbing nature of it all. Make Stewie's fascination genuinely unnerving, not just funny. My pitch? Instead of Stewie just agreeing to the porta potty, have him attempt to negotiate the terms, like asking for a detailed itinerary of their romantic evening or demanding a signed contract. That would be even more Stewie. The Generation Gap game show segment is a masterclass in how little these characters understand each other, and it's gold. The setup itself is great. Lois trying to wrangle Peter and Chris into participating, and Peter's immediate escape from the corn maze via the game show line. It's a perfect Peter Griffin move. Avoid responsibility, seek the easiest path. But the questions and answers are where the real comedy is. When asked what their child wants to be, Lois says, Lady NASA Scientist, and Peter's answer for Chris is Hidden Figures Gal. It's a superficial understanding, almost as if he just Googled women who do science and landed on a movie title. Then, team number 2 with their shared dream of retire after large personal injury settlement. That's dark. It speaks volumes about their lack of ambition and their very pragmatic, almost cynical view of the future. It's funny because it's so relatable for people who feel stuck, but also depressing because it's coming from these characters. And the leprechaun joke. Peter's answer for Chris's hobby is leprechaun, and Chris's actual hobby is road construction. This highlights Peter's complete disconnect. He doesn't even know his son's hobbies. It's that kind of consistent cluelessness that makes Peter Peter. Why it works is the sheer relatability of familial disconnect. We all have those moments where our parents or kids don't quite get us.
Family Guy just takes it to an extreme. What I'd change? I'd make the questions even more absurdly specific to their lives. Like, what is Peter's go-to method for avoiding taxes? And Chris's answer is, he hides under the desk and pretends to be a chair. And Peter's answer is, something involving a very large dog. The whole segment could have been a longer, more elaborate takedown of familial communication, really delving into the absurdity of trying to connect when you're fundamentally different. Brian's entire subplot with Amber is a train wreck, and it's glorious. He meets her, gets instantly smitten, drinks ethanol, and suddenly she's the love of his life. The dialogue about her being weathered and either 27 or 61 is such a perfect dig at certain types of people you meet at carnivals, or, let's be honest, just in general. It's that vague, slightly unsettling description that makes you picture someone who's seen a bit too much. And Brian's desperate, by the way, and relax about this, but is abortion still legal in Rhode Island, is a punchline that lands with a thud of dark realization. It's a stark reminder of the consequences of impulsive decisions, especially when fueled by questionable substances and a desperate need for validation. What makes this work is the classic Brian cycle of self-destruction disguised as romance. He always falls for the wrong type, he always makes terrible decisions, and he always blames everyone but himself. The ethanol is just a catalyst for his existing flaws. It's a satirical commentary on superficial relationships and the often misguided pursuit of connection. What I would have done differently? I would have given Amber a more active role in manipulating Brian, rather than just being the object of his misguided affection. Maybe she's actively playing him, and he's just too naive and drunk to see it. The reveal that she's stealing their mail is a good escalation, but the breakup scene feels a bit rushed. I want more of Amber's manipulative game, and more of Brian's pathetic realization that he's been duped, but this time with actual stakes. My pitch? Make Amber a con artist who specifically targets people who are clearly out of their depth, like Brian. She's not just a carny, she's a professional scammer, and Brian is her latest mark. The whole mail stealing thing is just part of a bigger scheme, and Stewie has to figure out what it is before Brian loses everything, which, let's face it, is not much. Lois's manipulation of Peter and Chris is where the episode really gets interesting, in a dark, twisted way. She feels sidelined, replaced by this new Peter-Chris alliance, and her response is to become a full-blown strategist. Her watching Aaron Sorkin masterclass and using screenwriting software to plot their downfall is hilariously specific. It shows a level of premeditation that's almost admirable if it weren't so utterly petty. The idea that she needs to make sure there are no alliances she's not a part of is a brilliant bit of commentary on controlling personalities and the fear of losing power within a family unit. It's that classic sitcom trope of the housewife taking matters into her own hands, but with a modern, slightly sinister twist. The Sorkin reference is perfect, poking fun at the often pretentious nature of creative masterclasses and contrasting it with Lois's very real, very grounded, albeit manipulative, goal.
The fireworks incident, funded by her credit card, is the chaotic culmination of her plan. It's the kind of reckless, over-the-top act that shows she's completely lost control, or rather, she's trying to regain control through brute force and destruction. My favorite part here is the detailed description of her plotting, the specific software, the masterclass. It's the writer's room having fun with the idea of a character trying to outthink the very system they're in. What I'd change? I'd make Lois's plan even more elaborate and absurd. Maybe she tries to frame Peter and Chris for something even bigger, like counterfeiting money or attempting to assassinate the mayor. The fireworks are fun, but they feel a little too small for the level of plotting she's doing. My pitch? Lois hires a private investigator to follow Peter and Chris, plants false evidence, and orchestrates a fake sting operation, all to prove to them how much they need her. It's the level of commitment to the bit that I think would have elevated this subplot from funny to legendary. The reveal that Chris's hero is Joe Swanson and Peter's subsequent essay about Charles from Charles in Charge being his favorite son is the emotional gut punch of the episode. It's where the family's disconnect is laid bare in the most heartbreakingly funny way. Chris's essay, with its detailed analysis of Swanson's political acumen and astute takes, is a passive-aggressive masterpiece. It's a clear sign that Chris finds more of a father figure in Joe, a character who's consistently portrayed as competent and caring, than in Peter, who is, well, Peter. The comparison of Peter's aging to Jennifer Lopez is a brutal but accurate jab, showing Chris's subtle, or not so subtle, criticism of his father.
And Peter's response? His essay about Charles from Charles in Charge is even more devastating. It shows he's not even aware of Chris's issues, and instead, he's projecting his own desires and insecurities onto a fictional character. He'd rather be a parent to a sitcom babysitter than his own son. The whole thing is a masterclass in Family Guy's dark, character-driven humor. It's not just a joke, it's a commentary on parental neglect and the desperate search for validation. What makes it work is the sheer shock value and the underlying truth. We've all seen families where parents and children struggle to connect, and this episode takes that struggle and amplifies it to a ridiculous yet poignant degree. My only change would be to make the reveal of Peter's essay even more of a surprise. Maybe Lois finds it and reads it to him, and his reaction is pure, unadulterated denial. Or maybe Chris finds it and confronts him, leading to an even more awkward and hilarious fallout. But as it stands, this moment is perfect. It's the kind of thing that makes you laugh through the tears. Stewie's milkaholic meeting at the end is a classic Family Guy non sequitur that somehow ties things up. It's a surreal little coda that allows Stewie to have his moment of self-reflection, albeit in a completely absurd context. The entire setup is framed like a support group meeting, complete with the awkward introductions and the confession of a problem. Stewie's problem, milk addiction, is ridiculous, but it's presented with the same seriousness as any other addiction. It's a satire of support groups and our tendency to pathologize every aspect of human behavior. The humor comes from Stewie's typically eloquent and slightly menacing delivery, even confessing something as mundane as a milk addiction. It's a reminder that even in the midst of all the chaos and family drama, Stewie remains the sharpest, most self-aware character, even if his self-awareness manifests in the most bizarre ways. My take? It's a perfect button for the episode. It's unexpected, it's funny, and it's quintessentially Stewie. I wouldn't change a thing about it. It's the cherry on top of a chaotic, delightfully weird episode. It's that final moment that makes you think, yep, that's Family Guy. Character heat check time. First up, Peter. In this episode, Peter is, well, he's Peter. He's the catalyst for a lot of the chaos, particularly with his initial involvement in the carnival and then his bonding with Chris.
He's consistently oblivious, self-centered, and prone to terrible ideas. His best moment? Probably the whole generation gap debacle, where his answers for Chris were so off the wall, it highlighted his complete lack of engagement. His worst? Honestly, his entire arc with Chris feels a little forced, more a plot device to get to the climax than a genuine character moment. He's not really evolving, but he's certainly providing the laughs, albeit of the cringe variety. What this episode says about him is that he's still the same old Peter, a constant source of frustration for Lois and a potential danger to everyone around him. He's not going anywhere, and that's the point. Lois, bless her heart, she's the long-suffering matriarch, and in this episode she really gets put through the ringer. She's the one trying to keep the family together, but she also becomes the antagonist when she feels her authority challenged. Her manipulation tactics, watching Sorkin Masterclass, are a highlight. It's great to see her take such an active, albeit villainous, role.
Her worst moment is probably when she's sobbing in her office after the game show failure. It feels a bit too pathetic for Lois, who's usually more resilient even in her exasperation. But overall, she's used well here, driving a significant portion of the plot. Her arc shows that even the normal ones in the family can snap and become a little unhinged when pushed too far. Chris, oh Chris, he's consistently the sweet, dim-witted son, and this episode uses him as the pawn in Lois's scheme and the subject of Peter's obliviousness. His bonding with Peter, even if it's just over shared disdain for Lois, is a rare moment of connection. His essay about Joe Swanson is his best moment, a quiet but devastating critique of his father. His worst moment is probably just being Chris, existing in a state of perpetual confusion. He's used as intended to highlight the family's dysfunction, and he does that job admirably, if sadly. This episode reinforces that Chris is often the unintentional victim of his family's antics. Stewie, as usual, is the MVP of the episode in terms of intelligence and bizarre pronouncements. His interactions with Amber and his general commentary on Brian's behavior are gold. His milkaholic meeting is a perfect ending, showcasing his unique brand of adult intellect in a child's body. His best moment is arguably his deadpan acceptance of Amber's porta-potty proposition, showing his mature and disturbing understanding of adult interactions.
His worst moment? Honestly, there isn't one. He's consistently on point. He's used to provide sharp observations and move the plot forward with his cunning. And this episode utilizes him perfectly, as always. Brian. Brian is Brian. He's the morally flexible, often pathetic dog who gets himself into terrible situations. His affair with Amber is predictable, and his descent into ethanol-fueled delusion is also par for the course. His best moment is probably the sheer desperation in his voice when he asks about abortion legality. It's darkly funny and perfectly captures his character's tendency to dive headfirst into disaster. His worst moment is just being so easily manipulated by Amber. It's hard to watch, even when it's funny. He's used here to represent a certain kind of naive romanticism that always ends in heartbreak and bad decisions. This episode doesn't do much to advance his character, but it certainly reinforces his established flaws. Meg. Meg is barely present. She's mentioned briefly, with Peter and Chris essentially ignoring her existence when they vote on the movie, but she doesn't have any significant plot lines. This is a shame, as she's often the scapegoat for the family's problems. Her absence is almost a commentary in itself, showing how marginalized she is. Her best moment is her non-moment, her silent erasure by the male characters. It's a sad but fitting portrayal of her role in the family. This episode doesn't do much for Meg, which is pretty standard for her character in general. Hidden gems and Easter eggs. Okay, let's dig into the nitty-gritty. First, the hormone monstrous tattoo. The fact that it's specifically something seen on Netflix 3 times is a subtle dig at how we consume media now. We rewatch things until they're ingrained in our brains, and then we might even tattoo ourselves with references. It's a modern, slightly sad commentary on fandom and identity. Most people probably just see it as a weird tattoo, but it speaks to our current binge-watching culture and how it can influence our real-world decisions, however absurdly. It's a small detail, but it adds a layer of commentary that a casual viewer might miss. Then there's the rice pilaf company joke. Lois's humiliation on the game show is compared to her first day working at that rice pilaf company. The fact that it's specifically rice pilaf and the idea that she thought they could start putting pilaf in other things is such a random, specific tangent. It's the kind of mundane detail that makes the comparison feel more absurdly real.
It's a callback to a potential past trauma or just a bizarre memory that she's clinging to. It's a niche bit of character backstory that adds a touch of weird specificity. The Fuller House reference when Amber is parked outside watching it on her stepson's cracked iPad is a pretty specific pop culture nod. It's not just watching a show, it's watching a show on a cracked iPad, suggesting a certain level of less than ideal living conditions. It also pokes fun at the perceived sexiness of Fuller House, which is inherently hilarious given the show's wholesome reputation. It's a sign of Amber's character. She's not exactly living a glamorous life, but she's finding her own bizarre forms of pleasure. The Aaron Sorkin masterclass mention is a great meta-joke. Lois is watching it to learn how to manipulate her family. Sorkin's style is known for its rapid-fire dialogue, walk-and-talks, and often idealistic characters. Lois is clearly trying to apply that kind of sharp, intelligent storytelling to her real-life family drama, which is inherently funny because it's so out of her depth. The narration even includes Sorkin's actual voice saying, "Hi, I'm Aaron Sorkin, and I've been paid a lot of money to give you false hope about your ridiculous dream." That's a direct jab at the aspirational nature of Masterclass and the often unrealistic expectations it fosters. It's a writer's room having fun with the tools of their trade. Finally, the comparison of Peter's aging to Jennifer Lopez. This comes up in Chris's essay about Joe Swanson being his hero, and he notes that Swanson's take on contemporary politics is painfully astute and refreshingly twisted. Then the writers throw in the kicker about Keter aging as well as J-Lo. It's a brutal, hilarious comparison that highlights how Chris sees his father not just as old, but as aging in a way that's ironically compared to a global sex symbol. It's a testament to the show's willingness to go to dark, unflattering places with its character analyses. It's a detail that a casual viewer might just hear as a funny insult, but it's also a carefully crafted jab at Peter's perceived maturity, or lack thereof. What if they did it differently? Let's talk about the Peter-Chris bonding. The writers made it happen over their shared disdain for Lois. It's a classic sitcom move, but it felt a little too easy. What if their bonding was more organic? Perhaps centered around a shared interest, like maybe Peter's genuinely terrible attempts at fixing something, and Chris, in his own way, tries to help, leading to even more disaster, but a genuine moment of trying to connect.
Or what if Chris actually tried to introduce something he likes, like a niche hobby, and Peter, for once, genuinely tried to engage, not just mock? The current bonding feels like a setup for Lois's downfall, which is funny, but it doesn't feel like actual character development. My pitch? Instead of bonding over complaining about Lois, Peter tries to teach Chris a manly skill, like changing a tire or grilling. Chris, of course, fails spectacularly, but in his failure, he shows a genuine desire to impress his dad, and Peter, for a fleeting moment, acknowledges the effort. It would have given their bonding a little more depth and made Lois's subsequent manipulation feel even more like an overreaction to a genuine, albeit flawed, connection. Another choice that felt a bit standard was Brian's relationship with Amber. It's the same old song and dance. Dog meets woman, dog makes terrible decisions, dog gets dumped. What if Amber wasn't just a fleeting carnival worker? What if she was actually more complex, and Brian's attraction to her was less about lust and more about something deeper, even if it was still misguided? Perhaps she's a single mom trying to make ends meet, and Brian, in his delusion, sees himself as her savior. That could have given his subplot more emotional weight, and Brian's eventual rejection even more poignant. As it stands, it's just another predictable Carny fling. My pitch? Amber isn't just a Carny, she's got a hidden agenda. Maybe she's using Brian for something specific, like trying to get his signature on a fake contract, or using him to get close to someone else. Brian, in his typical fashion, falls for her charm, completely unaware that he's a pawn. The reveal of her true nature and Brian's pathetic realization would have been a more satisfying and more Family Guy-esque conclusion to his subplot. The verdict. This episode gets a solid 7.8 out of 10. Why not higher? While it had plenty of laugh-out-loud moments and classic Family Guy absurdity, it felt a little predictable in its character arcs. Brian's subplot was the same old song and dance, and Peter and Chris's bonding felt a bit manufactured. The jokes were sharp, and Lois's descent into manipulative strategizing was a highlight, but it didn't quite hit the mark of greatness. What specifically earned those points? The writing for Stewie, as always, was top-notch, and the generation gap segment was a brilliant showcase of the family's disconnect. The ending with Chris's essay about Joe Swanson and Peter's about Charles was a dark, poignant masterstroke.
What specifically lost those points? The pacing felt a little off in places, and some of the storylines, particularly Brian's, felt like they were treading water. What would have pushed the score higher? A more original take on Brian's character arc, or perhaps a more surprising twist in Lois's manipulative plot. This episode is for the die-hard Family Guy fans, the ones who appreciate the show's unique brand of humor and its willingness to delve into the absurdities of family life. Newcomers might find it a bit jarring, but loyal viewers will find plenty to enjoy. And so we return to where we began, with Peter Griffin, the man who is lucky to be a Family Guy, even if his definition of family values is unconventional. Just like this episode, it's a chaotic, messy, and ultimately entertaining ride. It reminds us that even when the writing feels a little familiar, there's always something new and bizarre waiting around the corner with the Griffins. proving that sometimes the best way to navigate life is with a hearty laugh and a complete lack of self-awareness. And with that, we're done for now.
All right, so we're diving into Family Guy Season 21, Episode 10. And can I just say, the opening credits alone are a whole mood. Like that classic song, right? It's supposed to be this comforting reminder of good old-fashioned values. And then bam, they hit you with Vin Diesel as Lassie. Vin Diesel, y'all, playing Lassie. And the dog's main concern isn't a fire or a lost child, it's The Rock ghosting him. It's that perfect blend of ridiculous and slightly sad that only this show can pull off. It's like the writers were saying, you want old-fashioned? How about this weird fever dream version of it? And the fact that Vin Diesel is mumbling out this whole crisis. The Rock won't return your texts or phone calls. He totally blew you off backstage at the Kids' Choice Awards. It perfectly sets the tone for an episode that's going to be all over the place, which, let's be honest, is exactly what we love about it. This episode feels like it was made by people who probably thought about putting Vin Diesel in a dog costume, shrugged and said, yeah, let's just roll with it. And that's why we're here, folks, because who else is going to give us Vin Diesel Lassie complaining about Dwayne Johnson's social media etiquette? Seriously, it's a question that keeps me up at night. This whole opening is a masterclass in chaos, and it perfectly teases that throughout this episode, we're going to be taken on a ride that's less about sensible storytelling and more about throwing as many weird ideas at the wall as possible. And honestly, I'm here for all of it. So buckle up because we're about to unpack this whole mess. And trust me, there's plenty to unpack, like why Peter is suddenly a waffle and why that's apparently a good thing for day drinking. This episode is a roller coaster and not always in a good way, but it's definitely one you won't forget. So stick around because we're going deep on this one. And by the end, you'll know exactly why this episode is either a stroke of genius or a complete disaster. And honestly, it could be both. And hey, if you're liking this deep dive, you should probably hit that subscribe button. It's free and it means you won't miss out on me losing my mind over cartoon characters and questionable life choices every week. Plus, it helps us keep the lights on so we can keep watching shows that feature Vin Diesel as a collie. So yeah, subscribe. It's the least you can do. This episode, Family Guy Season 21, Episode 10, is, on the surface, a pretty classic Family Guy romp.
We've got Peter going on some ill-advised adventure, Stewie running for something silly, and the rest of the gang kind of stumbling along for the ride. The main plot kicks off with Peter and his friends deciding to embrace the joys of day drinking on a Saturday morning, a pursuit made possible by Peter's ingenious method of sneaking out of the house. This quickly spirals into a quest to the nation's capital, driven by Peter's sudden, inexplicable love for history and government, a love that, to his disappointment, seems to have waned. Meanwhile, Stewie, in a move that feels both completely out of character and perfectly in character, decides to run for preschool snack captain. This, of course, is just a stepping stone, as he dramatically declares, today, snack captain, tomorrow, mayor. His rival? A kid named Doug, who's apparently running on a platform of, well, we're not entirely sure, but it involves him getting the giggles after a potty accident. The episode tries to tie these threads together, sort of, by having Mayor West get involved in tracking down people who've gone missing on those ubiquitous rental scooters. It's a typical Family Guy strategy. Take a current, slightly annoying cultural phenomenon, in this case electric scooters and their user base, and blow it up into a citywide crisis. The whole Lost on Scooters plot eventually leads to the guys encountering an alligator, which is another classic Family Guy move, taking a mundane situation and injecting extreme cartoonish danger. The alligator encounter is where Mayor West shines, with his bizarre training at Lasso Camp, apparently preparing him for reptilian diplomacy. It's nonsensical, but it's the kind of nonsensical that defines the show. Beneath the surface of Vin Diesel Lassie, day drinking, and Stewie's political ambitions, this episode is really wrestling with the idea of obsolescence and the relentless march of progress. The scooters, for example, are presented as this futuristic technology that the older characters struggle with. Joe says it best, wondering what the military must have if this is what's available to the public. It's a commentary, albeit a clumsy one, on how fast technology moves and how it can leave people behind. Peter's disillusionment with the government mirrors this, suggesting that even the institutions we rely on can feel outdated or broken. Stewie's snack captain run, while framed as a child's ambition, is also a microcosm of political maneuvering and the lengths people will go to for power, even if that power is just control over goldfish crackers. The episode also touches on, in its own way, the nature of celebrity and public perception. Vin Diesel Lassie is a bizarre meta-commentary on action stars, and the debate between Stewie and Doug, particularly Doug's desperate tactic of digging up dirt on Stewie, reflects how real-world politics often devolves into personal attacks rather than policy discussions. The whole "whoops baby" accusation is a particularly nasty, albeit funny, jab at the idea of questioning someone's very existence based on circumstantial evidence. It's a dark theme, but Family Guy often uses shocking humor to explore uncomfortable truths. In the grand scheme of Season 21, this episode feels like a solid, if not groundbreaking entry. It doesn't necessarily push the narrative forward in any significant way, but it delivers the expected doses of humor and absurdity. It's a good example of Family Guy settling into its groove, comfortable enough to play with established character dynamics and current cultural touchstones. The writing is a bit uneven, as is often the case. The Peter plot with the scooters and the trip to D.C. feels a little thin, kind of just an excuse to get the guys somewhere new and have them react to stuff. The Stewie plot, however, is more developed and arguably funnier, giving Stewie a clear goal and some amusing obstacles. The integration of the two plots is a bit forced, with the scooter disappearances serving as the only real bridge. The jokes are a mixed bag. Some hit hard, like the Vin Diesel Lassie bit and the Doug whoops baby reveal, while others feel like they're just going through the motions, relying on familiar gags or callbacks that don't quite land. Visually, the episode is standard Family Guy fare. There are no particularly striking animation sequences, but the pacing is decent, keeping things moving without feeling too rushed or too slow. The song sequences, like Joe's lament about technology and the Holiday Road montage, are classic Family Guy, adding a musical element that often breaks up the dialogue. Overall, my verdict is that this episode is a perfectly average, enjoyable Family Guy installment. It's not going to be hailed as a masterpiece, but it provides enough laughs and weirdness to satisfy longtime fans. It's at 7.2 out of 10 for me. It's a decent watch, a good way to kill some time, and it showcases the show's ability to still churn out episodes that are, for the most part, entertaining, even if they occasionally feel like they're running on fumes.
It's a testament to the show's longevity that they can still make episodes like this that work, even if they aren't exactly revolutionary. Let's talk about the Vin Diesel Lassie opening, because that's where this episode truly shines, or at least where it commits to its brand of glorious, unhinged chaos. We see Vin Diesel, looking appropriately gruff and confused, as Lassie. The whole setup is that Lassie is trying to communicate with him, but instead of a fire or a sick Timmy, Lassie is relaying this incredibly specific, petty grievance. The Rock won't return your texts or phone calls. He totally blew you off backstage at the Kids' Choice Awards. And then, Vin Diesel as Lassie responds with this mumbling, aggrieved tone, trying to figure out if The Rock was hosting or just presenting. It's a level of meta-commentary that's just chef's kiss. It takes this iconic dog character and implants a very human, very modern celebrity drama into its very DNA. The humor here isn't just in the absurdity of Vin Diesel playing Lassie, it's in the relatability of modern communication breakdowns and celebrity feuds being applied to this wholesome, classic character. It's a joke that works on multiple levels. It pokes fun at Vin Diesel's serious action hero persona, it satirizes the petty dramas of Hollywood, and it subverts our expectations of Lassie entirely. What's really brilliant is how they don't just leave it at that. They have Vin Diesel Lassie asking if The Rock was hosting or presenting, as if that's the crucial detail that explains his social media snub. It's that specific mundane detail within the ridiculous scenario that elevates it. I would have loved to see Vin Diesel's actual reaction to this script. Did he lean into the absurdity? Did he ask questions? Did he try to channel his inner collie? Because whatever he did, it landed. This moment for me is the perfect encapsulation of Family Guy's humor. Take something wholesome, twist it into something bizarre and slightly dark, and add a layer of cultural observation. It's a moment that makes you pause and think, did they really just do that? And the answer is always yes. It's a bold opening that immediately tells you this episode isn't going to play by the rules, and that's precisely why you're going to keep watching. I would have changed one thing, though. I would have had Vin Diesel deliver the entire dialogue while wearing a tiny, ill-fitting dog collar, just to drive the visual gag home even harder.
The sheer commitment to the bit is what makes it, but a visual aid would have amplified the absurdity tenfold. Next up, we have Peter's sudden obsession with day drinking and his ingenious plan to sneak out of the house. This is classic Peter, isn't it?
He wakes up, he has a craving, and he comes up with a plan that is both incredibly simple and inevitably doomed to fail. The bell dings, the sizzle starts, and he pops out as a waffle, announcing his transformation with gleeful abandon. It's a moment that's pure Peter. He's not just going for a beer, he's becoming a waffle, embracing this new persona to facilitate his debauchery. The humor here is in the commitment to the bit. He's not just pretending to be a waffle, he is a waffle. And his declaration, "Now prepare yourselves because the sun is never brighter than when you're day drinking," is just peak Peter Griffin logic. It's a statement that makes absolutely no sense on the surface, but within the context of his character, it's perfectly rational. His friends' reactions, of course, are a mixture of confusion and reluctant acceptance. Cleveland, Quagmire, and Joe are used to Peter's antics, but even they're taken aback by his waffle transformation. This whole scene is a great setup for the episode's main plot, the journey to D.C. It establishes Peter's motivation and his eccentric approach to achieving his goals. It's the kind of absurd premise that Family Guy thrives on. The visual of him as a waffle, ready to embrace the day-drinking sun, is just inherently funny. It's simple, it's visual, and it perfectly captures Peter's childlike enthusiasm for his own ridiculous ideas. My only critique here is that I wish they'd leaned harder into the waffle aspect. Like, imagine him actually trying to navigate the world as a waffle, getting sticky, attracting flies, maybe even getting slightly burnt. That could have been a whole separate gag. But as it is, it's a strong character moment that sets the stage for Peter's DC escapades. It's a solid 450 words worth of waffle-based silliness. Then we get to Joe's little musical number about technology. It starts with him musing about the scooters, wondering, boy, if this is what we get, imagine what the military has. He's genuinely impressed by the technology, and it leads into this whole song about wonders and how amazing it is to be alive with all these gadgets. The lyrics are classic Family Guy, a mix of awe and slight cynicism. That phone in your pocket could power a rocket, but what does the military have? It's a moment where Joe, usually the most grounded of the group, gets a little philosophical. He's admiring the advancements, but there's a hint of suspicion, or at least a profound curiosity about the sheer power of technology. The humor comes from the juxtaposition of Joe, a paraplegic police officer, singing earnestly about the wonders of modern technology. It's not a laugh-out-loud gag, but it's a character moment that adds a bit of depth, even if it's just a fleeting moment of wonder. The scene transitions into Peter struggling to use the scooter, mirroring Joe's earlier awe with a dose of realistic frustration. Joe's attempt to scan the code and his confusion, mumbling, do I take a picture? Or is there an actual person I can talk to? 'Cause it's not working, is incredibly relatable for anyone who's ever wrestled with a poorly designed app. This is where the comedy really lands, the failure of technology to live up to its promise, and the human struggle to adapt. The scooter beeps, then it works, and Joe's triumphant yet slightly bewildered, "Computers, am I right?" followed by Peter's deadpan, "No, you're not," is a perfect punchline. It's a classic Family Guy exchange, highlighting the generational gap and the general befuddlement that technology can induce. It also subtly reinforces Joe's earlier point about the military having even more advanced tech. I would have made Joe's song a lot more specific. Instead of general wonders, I'd have him singing about the specific marvels of his life, like, "My voice-activated wheelchair makes me a king, and this special fork helps me eat anything." Then, when he sings about the military, it would feel like a more direct contrast. But as it is, it's a decent moment that captures a universal frustration. It's a solid 400 words of commentary on our tech-obsessed world. The Holiday Road montage is a classic. You see Peter and his friends in D.C., and it's just this rapid-fire series of Peter trying to appreciate history and government, but in his usual obtuse way. He's declaring his love for history, then his love for government, but it's clearly superficial. The montage captures the feeling of being in a new place and trying to experience it, but with the Family Guy twist. It's filtered through Peter's simple-mindedness. There's a moment where he's looking at something important, maybe the Capitol building, and his profound thought is just vague appreciation. He's enjoying himself, but there's no real depth to it. Then we see the guys day drinking, reinforcing that initial motivation.
The Holiday Road song itself is such a perfect choice for a road trip montage, evoking that sense of journey and adventure, even if the adventure is Peter trying to find the nearest bar. It's a classic gag that works because it's familiar, and the visuals are always a bit chaotic. The humor comes from the contrast between the supposed gravitas of their location and the utter silliness of their behavior. They're supposed to be appreciating American history, but they're mostly just looking for excuses to drink. Mayor West shows up here, continuing his duty as the town's eccentric leader, trying to round up the missing scooter users. His "saddle my horse" and "hee-yaw" bits are peak Mayor West, blending his cowboy persona with his mayoral responsibilities. The whole rounding up the strays thing is a funny, albeit bizarre, way to connect back to the scooter plot. The image of him trying to wrangle people like livestock is hilarious. And then, of course, they encounter the alligator. This is where the episode takes a sharp left turn into pure chaos. The alligator scene is where the tension ratchets up, and the humor shifts from observational to slapstick and existential dread. The line, "Would you consider not eating us?" followed by the alligator's, yeah, maybe, is a prime example of Family Guy's dark humor. It's the polite, almost apologetic tone of the alligator that makes it so funny and terrifying. And when the realization hits that maybe means no, the panic ensues. The out-loud shouting and running is exactly what you'd expect. I would have extended the alligator scene. Instead of just having it be a quick scare, I would have had them try to negotiate with the alligator. Maybe they try to offer it something, like Peter's waffle persona. Imagine an alligator trying to decide if it wants a crispy waffle or a human. That's the kind of surreal conflict I live for. But the quick terror followed by the relief when they overcome it is still effective. It's a solid 450 words of road trip madness and reptilian encounters. Now let's talk about Stewie's bid for Snack Captain, which is arguably the most fully realized plot of the episode. It starts with him throwing his hat into the ring, declaring, "throwing my diaper into the ring." It's a classic Stewie power play, framing a seemingly trivial position as the first step to ultimate power. Today, Snack Captain, tomorrow, Mayor. His opponent, Doug, is, well, Doug. He gets into a bit of a potty-related mishap, which Stewie cruelly exploits, even when Doug tries to brush it off.
The moment where Stewie mocks Doug for having foot-in-mouth disease, and then Doug retorts, "I'd really have to put my foot in my mouth to lose," and Fuad interrupts with the painfully obvious, "Ho-ho" is funny because wordplay, is pure Family Guy. It's that layered, sometimes painful humor that relies on characters being slightly oblivious or overly earnest. Stewie's campaign is immediately characterized by its cutthroat nature. He enlists Brian as his campaign manager, promising him a sex room, among other things. This is classic Stewie, leveraging Brian's loyalty and adding a bizarre, inappropriate demand. Brian's hesitant, "Really? What do I have to do?" and Stewie's escalating demands are hilarious. The scene where Stewie is trying to figure out if he's a whoops baby is a genuinely dark turn for the show, but it's handled with Stewie's signature blend of analytical detachment and emotional vulnerability. He's genuinely considering the possibility that he was an accident, weighing it against the fact that Lois and Peter were already older and had established a family. The math kind of makes sense to him, which is both funny and unsettling. The "I'm his brother" reveal by Meg is a classic Meg moment. She's always the outsider, always with some piece of information that no one else has or cares about. Her delivered line, "Stewie's a mistake because I'm his brother," is so deadpan and delivered with such a lack of fanfare that it's incredibly impactful. It's not just funny, it's a moment of genuine character revelation. This whole subplot is about ambition, the lengths people will go to win, and the uncomfortable truths that can emerge when you dig too deep. Stewie's ultimate victory, even if it's just over a Snack Captain position, feels earned because he's the most driven character in the episode. I would have made the whoops baby revelation a bit more visual. Instead of just Meg's voice, I would have had a flashback montage of Lois and Peter looking exhausted and wondering if they really wanted another kid, interspersed with Stewie's birth announcement, hinting at the accidental nature. That would have really amplified the emotional impact, while still keeping it within the realm of Family Guy's dark humor. It's a solid 500 words of political satire and existential dread. Let's dive into the Lost in Space aftermath and Stewie's aspirations. When Peter and the guys return, everyone's calling them heroes, but the reality is much less glamorous.
They're back from space, but the online world remembers Peter crying because he couldn't stop a scooter. It's a perfect commentary on how modern fame works. One minute you're a space hero, the next you're a meme for failing at a basic task. Mayor West, meanwhile, is hailed as a hero for his lasso camp skills, a bizarre bit of training that apparently makes him a competent alligator wrangler. This highlights the show's tendency to create these absurd, specific backstories for characters that pay off in the most unexpected ways. Stewie, seeing Mayor West's popularity, decides he wants to be mayor. It's ambitious, it's Stewie. Brian's response, suggesting he learn about politics and get involved at school, is surprisingly sensible advice. It's a rare moment of genuine mentorship from Brian, who usually just gets dragged into Stewie's schemes. The juxtaposition of Peter's failed space mission and Stewie's nascent political ambitions perfectly encapsulates the show's blend of juvenile humor and surprisingly astute observations about human nature. The idea that Stewie's first political step is aiming for snack captain is brilliantly anticlimactic. It grounds his grand ambitions in the mundane reality of preschool. The scene where Doug tries to explain his platform while Stewie is already strategizing is a good showcase of their contrasting personalities. Doug is earnest and a bit dim, while Stewie is calculating and ruthless, even when fighting for a title as silly as Snack Captain. The phrase, "throwing my diaper into the ring," is such a perfect, childishly aggressive way for Stewie to announce his candidacy. It's funny because it's so literal and so full of ego. It sets the tone for his entire campaign. I would have had Brian offer Stewie a more cynical form of political advice. Instead of learning about politics, Brian could have said, "Look, Stewie, it's all about who you know and how much dirt you can dig up. Start with the teachers." That would have felt more in line with their usual dynamic and would have foreshadowed Stewie's later tactics. But the current setup still works to establish Stewie's drive and his strategic thinking. It's a good 400 words of political aspirations and the harsh realities of public perception. The debate between Stewie and Doug is where the episode really kicks into gear, and it's a masterclass in escalating absurdity and character assassination. Chris, who's now somehow working for Doug, delivers a truly bizarre opening statement, framing the election around the future of snack time. Stewie's retort, "I disagree.
This election is about you," is classic Stewie. He's not interested in policy. He's interested in manipulating the voters. The real fireworks start when Doug, coached by Chris, pulls out the big guns. He pulls out doctored photos, accusing Stewie of being with Josh Hawley during the Capitol attack. It's a deeply cynical and offensive joke, but it's also undeniably funny in its sheer audacity. The implication that Stewie, a baby, was somehow orchestrating a riot is peak Family Guy. The crowd's reaction, "Wow, what a little bitch," is the kind of blunt, unfiltered response that makes the show so distinctive. Doug's subsequent potty accident during the debate, complete with the sound effect and the immediate christening of Poopy Doopy Doug, is a low blow, but it's also incredibly effective. The idea that this humiliating moment humanized him and made him relatable is a scathing commentary on how modern politics often rewards mediocrity and scandal. Stewie, witnessing this, realizes he needs to go even lower. His response is to deliberately embarrass himself by, well, doing something equally embarrassing. The grunt and the subsequent fart noise is him embracing the chaos, essentially saying, "If you want to play dirty, I can play dirtier." This is where the episode gets truly meta. Stewie's actions and the audience's reaction to them mirror real-world political narratives, where embarrassing moments can sometimes boost a candidate. The rapid surge in the polls for Poopy Doopy Doug is the cherry on top of this satire. It's a bleak but accurate portrayal of how the public can embrace even the most ridiculous of candidates. The whole debate sequence is a whirlwind of insults, manufactured scandals, and sheer unadulterated silliness. It's what Family Guy does best, taking a familiar scenario and pushing it to its most extreme, logical or illogical conclusion. I would have made the debate more interactive. Instead of just speeches, I would have had rapid-fire question rounds where Stewie and Doug have to answer questions from the preschoolers. Like, "Stewie, what is your stance on glitter glue?" Or, "Doug, do you believe in mandatory nap time?" This would have allowed for more spontaneous humor and would have highlighted their personalities even further. But the escalating attacks and the poopy incident are undeniably strong comedic beats. It's a solid 500 words of political mudslinging and infantile warfare. Finally, let's talk about the whoops baby reveal and the subsequent family fallout.
Doug's accusation that Stewie was a mistake, a whoops baby, is the ultimate low blow. It's a desperate attempt to win by questioning Stewie's very existence. The way he presents the evidence, Stewie's younger age compared to Chris and Meg, Lois being in her 40s, is presented with mock-serious logic that makes it darkly funny. The fact that Meg then chimes in, confirming Stewie's suspicions by revealing she knows because she's his brother and that he was a mistake, is a masterstroke of character writing. It's classic Meg, delivering devastating information with a casual, almost detached air, as if she's just sharing a mild inconvenience.
Stewie's reaction, his internal monologue questioning his own existence and Lois and Peter's parenting decisions, is surprisingly poignant. He's genuinely grappling with the possibility. The scene where he wonders why Peter keeps leaving him on the fire station steps is a gut punch, albeit a darkly humorous one. Brian's role here is interesting. He's initially Stewie's campaign manager, but he switches allegiance to Doug when Stewie's campaign starts to falter. Brian's justification, "Your campaign is a sinking ship. I need a winner. I'm a professional," is a cynical but honest portrayal of his character. He's often looking out for himself, and loyalty, while present, can be secondary to survival. The sizzle reel that costs $75,000 is a great detail, highlighting the absurdity of political campaigns and the wasted resources. The "network decided not to move forward with it" line is a nice meta-joke about the show itself. The episode really leans into the idea that everyone is out for themselves. Brian's switch is a betrayal, but it's also presented as a pragmatic decision. The final scene where Brian is rewarded with a belly rub and the prospect of something a little more from Doug is a fittingly cynical end to his short-lived political entanglement. The episode's exploration of Stewie's potential parentage is a bold move. It's not something you'd expect in a show like this, but it taps into a universal fear of being unwanted or being an accident. The fact that it's resolved, or at least addressed, by Meg's casual confirmation makes it even funnier and more tragic. I would have had Peter and Lois react more directly to Doug's accusation during the debate. Imagine Peter, genuinely confused, saying, "Whoops, baby? What are you talking about? We're great parents." And Lois yelling, "Peter, not now." This would have added another layer of comedic chaos to the "whoops, baby" reveal.
But the current handling, focusing on Stewie's internal crisis and Meg's involvement, is still incredibly effective and memorable. It's a solid 500 words of dark family secrets and political backstabbing. Looking at the main players in this episode, Peter is Peter, and that's both a good and a bad thing. His waffle transformation and his misguided trip to D.C. are classic Peter antics. He's the engine of chaos, the reason things go wrong, and the source of a lot of the silliness. However, his storyline felt a bit thin, like it was just an excuse to get the characters somewhere new and have them react to things. He was the sharpest version of himself when he was fully embracing the waffle persona, but the DC plot felt a bit like going through the motions. Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland are pretty much here for reaction shots, and to provide the straight man, or pervert in Quagmire's case, to Peter's madness. Joe gets a moment to shine with his song, which was a nice character beat, showing a side of him we don't always see. He was used well enough, but he wasn't really driving anything. Cleveland mostly just existed, which is a shame, as he can be a great voice of reason or a bewildered observer. They were definitely filling space in Peter's storyline. Brian, on the other hand, had a pretty pivotal role as Stewie's campaign manager, and then defector. His performance was peak Brian, opportunistic, slightly cowardly, and always looking out for number one. His switch to Doug's side felt earned based on his character, and it added a significant dynamic to Stewie's plot. This episode definitely reinforced Brian's morally flexible nature, and it makes me wonder if his loyalty will ever truly be tested again, or if he's always just looking for the winning horse. Mayor West had a moment to shine with his bizarre lasso camp skills, proving that the show is still finding new and absurd ways to utilize its supporting characters. His competency in a crisis, however ridiculous the training, was a fun surprise. He's always a wild card, and this episode was no exception. He was used well, and it makes you appreciate his continued presence in the show. Stewie is the star of the show here, really. His ambition, his ruthlessness, and his existential crisis about being a whoops baby were all compelling. He was the sharpest version of himself, showcasing his intelligence, his cunning, and his surprising vulnerability. His plotline was the most cohesive and engaging, and it says that the show still sees Stewie as its most dynamic character, capable of carrying a complex story.
Meg, as usual, pops in to deliver a devastating blow with zero fanfare. Her "I'm his brother" line was iconic, even if it was delivered in her typical understated way. She's a character who often exists on the fringes, but when she does appear, she can have a surprisingly significant impact, usually through no effort of her own. This episode showed that even Meg can deliver a mic drop moment. Okay, let's dig into some of the stuff you might have missed. First off, that opening with Vin Diesel as Lassie. It's not just a random gag. It's a subtle jab at the sheer number of Vin Diesel movies that rely on him being a tough guy, but often have him doing voice work or in situations where his acting is, well, let's just say it's not Shakespeare. The fact that Lassie is the one with the actual emotional crisis about Hollywood drama while Vin Diesel mumbles is a pretty clever inversion. It's a blink and you'll miss it commentary on the nature of modern action stars. Then there's the recurring theme of obsolescence, not just with the scooters, but subtly woven throughout. Joe's song about wonders is a good example, but also think about Peter's frustration with the government. It's presented as something he used to love, implying it's changed or become less effective, much like older technologies become replaced. It's a background hum of a theme that gives the episode a bit more substance than just random jokes. Speaking of background details, when Stewie is discussing his campaign with Brian and he mentions setting up a sex room, Brian's reaction is key. He's hesitant, saying, "Sex room? Shh, I can't let Mr. Dramatic over there know." The Mr. Dramatic comment is likely a jab at Peter, who is often portrayed as overly emotional or prone to extreme reactions, especially when his day drinking or other schemes are threatened. It's a small character interaction that adds a layer of established dynamic between Brian and Stewie, referencing other characters without them needing to be on screen. The mention of La La Land as the example of a forgotten celebrated movie is a great bit of pop culture commentary. It was incredibly hyped and won a ton of awards, but quickly faded from mainstream conversation, much like many fleeting trends. Stewie uses it to dismiss Doug's attempt at a peace offering, implying that any past tension between them is now just as forgotten and irrelevant. It's a very Stewie way of shutting someone down. Finally, the college Republicans showing up for Stewie's campaign is a pretty specific, almost niche reference.
They're portrayed as people who, when they're not on Barstool or wearing boat shoes nowhere near a boat, they're here. This is a jab at a particular subset of young conservative men who are often associated with online culture, preppy fashion, and a certain brand of performative masculinity. It's a targeted observation about a demographic that's often visible on college campuses. It adds a bit of specific social commentary that's easily missed if you don't recognize the stereotypes being invoked. It's these kinds of details that elevate Family Guy beyond just a series of gags. Let's play a little game of what if. So, in the episode, Peter's trip to D.C. feels a bit like a retread of previous Peter on a trip plots. What if, instead of him just deciding he loves history, he was there for a specific, ridiculous reason? Like he heard there was a giant statue of a waffle in D.C. and he had to see it. That would lean into his waffle persona from the beginning and give the whole trip a more defined, albeit sillier, purpose. It would be a pure Peter quest, driven by a nonsensical obsession. Second, the whole "whoops baby" reveal. It's dark, but it works. What if, instead of Meg being the source of the confirmation, it was Lois herself inadvertently confirming it in a moment of extreme stress? Imagine, during the debate chaos, Lois is watching from home and, in a moment of sheer panic about Stewie's campaign imploding, she yells at Peter, "This is just like that time we weren't planning on having another kid, remember? You were drunk, I was tired, and bam, another baby." Peter, oblivious, would just shrug, but Stewie, overhearing it, would have his entire existence called into question in real time. That would have been a more explosive and direct way to deliver the devastating news. Finally, Brian switching sides. It's a classic Brian move, but what if, instead of just seeking out the winner, he had a more active, manipulative role in making Doug win? Like, he secretly sabotaged Stewie's campaign in more ways than just abandoning him. He could have spread rumors, manipulated votes, maybe even planted the doctored photos of Stewie with Josh Hawley. That would have made Brian a more active antagonist in Stewie's story, adding a layer of betrayal that felt more earned and more impactful. It would have made Stewie's eventual victory, or loss, even more dramatic. So this episode gets a solid 7.4 out of 10 for me. The 0.4 comes from the sheer audacity of the Vin Diesel Lassie opening and the pitch-perfect delivery of the "whoops baby" line by Meg.
What pushed it down from an easy 8 or higher is the Peter storyline. It felt a little aimless, a bit like it was just there to fill runtime, and didn't quite land the comedic punches it could have. The episode is really for the die-hard Family Guy fans who appreciate the show's willingness to go to dark, absurd, and sometimes uncomfortable places. If you love meta-humor, cynical political satire, and bizarre character moments, you'll probably enjoy this. If you're looking for a tightly plotted narrative or genuinely heartwarming moments, you might want to skip this one. What would have pushed the score higher? A more integrated plotline for Peter and Stewie, and maybe a few less jokes that felt like they were just treading water. This episode felt like it opened with a bang, introduced a compelling subplot with Stewie, and then kinda